Should you use Filmhub to distribute your indie feature film? Well, I'm going to let the CEO convince you of why you should. Today, I'm interviewing Alan Descragnole, who is the founder and CEO of Filmhub. Alan and I discussed his background of why he started Filmhub, what advantages Filmhub has over other distribution methods, and his advice on how filmmakers can be successful in today's digital age. Here's my interview with Alan Descragnole. I'm really curious about your background and what led to the creation of Filmhub.
So some may notice that I am not a filmmaker by trade, but I do have a start in creative roots, actually. I was very into theater production, actually, back in my university days and helped run one of the University of Pennsylvania's largest theater organizations, which is kind of where my interest and love of the arts came. And spent a number of years after that actually building technology companies. Worked on massive technology companies such as Google, Intuit, Square, and the Cash App, and met my co-founder Klaus, who is a world-renowned composer behind Pirates of the Caribbean, Gladiator, Thin Red Line, Mission Impossible 2, and we paired up to start Filmhub. That's how we got here.
Now, I've talked about Filmhub a lot on my channel, but there's always an opportunity to introduce it to new people. So can you give me a brief overview of what Filmhub is and what you offer to filmmakers?
So Filmhub is a worldwide all rights distributor. We work with individual producers, but we also work with distributors and sales agents and studios to help further the reach of their films. On the filmmaker and producer side, we also offer, direct marketing services and support to help them scale and reaching their audiences as well.
Now, I'm really curious your take on this. What do you think, having worked in this industry for a few years now, what do you think are the biggest challenges that indie filmmakers face with distribution today? And how do you think Filmhub kind of helps filmmakers out with those challenges?
So I think, Alex, I would slightly reframe the question. Ultimately, it's what does the entire industry have a problem of ultimately? It's not just filmmakers. It is studio system. It is massive production companies. It is distributors. It is sales agents. The entire industry is in chaos right now. And that's something ultimately that, as filmmakers, it's important to realize, like, it is not just something that, the filmmaker is getting beat down upon. It is the entire industry is at a time of upheaval. And that's ultimately because of the fact that technology has completely changed the way that this industry works. And the industry is playing catch up. This industry is established in a world where transactional or theatrical and broadcast used to be the basis of it. And streaming came, and the industry kept trying to act in the way that broadcast and theatrical worked. There's still gatekeepers around deciding who and what gets distributed, and that happens at every single level. There are tons and tons of titles at the studio level that are not getting properly distributed, as there are for individual filmmakers and producers. It's the entire industry is struggling with the advent of streaming and how you get titles out in the world. There are now thousands of different streaming services that you need to get your title out in front of in order to really be able to monetize. And that's a big change that the industry is not fully there for yet. And that's one of the reasons why we work with both individual producers as well as distributors and sales agents and studios.
Now, why do you think that filmmakers should choose Filmhub over traditional distribution platforms or even places like Amazon where you can upload directly?
Ultimately, it's reach. We have one of the largest licensing networks ultimately in the industry. It's one of the reasons that many distributors and sales agents have to partner with us because they themselves can't reach the furthest that they can ultimately. We have deep industry relationships across these locations. And so that's number one. Number two, ultimately, we offer the fastest and most efficient distribution in the industry. We get a title out faster on more services than anyone else ultimately in the industry. And that's shown by directly in our analytics, our dashboards that we provide our producers, as well as our catalog owners. And that's one of the main importance ultimately for Filmhub.
How were you able to build a lot of these relationships with the platforms?
Comes down to ultimately, we're from the industry, right? Klaus, world-renowned composer behind Pirates of the Caribbean, Gladiator, Thin Red Line, deep standing industry relationships there. He's working on major studio productions. That's where it starts with. And now the fact ultimately that, we have one of, the world's premier catalogs that we distribute, it makes it much easier when we go to new channel, that's just coming up saying like, hey, do you want access to a massive library of titles that we can help accelerate for you? That conversation gets easier and easier. We're at every, major market now. And we're also meeting with these buyers on a regular basis. And guess what? Network effects ultimately happen, and we make sure that we have good word of mouth with all these people.
Before we move on, I wanted to quickly go over some of the ways that you can support me. The easiest way is subscribing to my channel and watching my latest videos. I've also started a membership program that gives you early access to videos before they go live. It starts at just $3 a month on YouTube and Patreon, and if memberships aren't your thing, you can buy individual posts directly on Patreon without the membership fee. My feature film Cashing Out is available to watch on major platforms like Amazon and Apple TV, and you can even watch for free on platforms like Tubi, Plex, and YouTube. If you want to support directly, there's a pay what you want option on my own OTT platform that starts at just $2. And if you do watch the film, it would mean the world to me to leave a review on IMDb, Letterboxd, or your favorite platform. Lastly, if you're interested in my future film projects, you can sign up for my email list. I have some exciting new films that I can't wait to share with you all. All of these items will be linked in the description below. Thank you so much for the support. Now let's get back to the show. Now, one of my favorite parts about Filmhub is that you guys are pretty transparent as far as like your revenue split. You say right from the beginning, you filmmakers are getting 80%, we're getting 20%. And I'm a product of that. I'm on Filmhub and I can attest to that for sure. But can you explain a little bit more about the revenue model share or the revenue share model and why it benefits filmmakers in that way?
So I think it's one thing is important to understand how distribution agreements were generally structured ultimately. And this is the key that we've, really changed the way that a distribution agreement works for most filmmakers and producers. Generally, a distribution agreement, you have what are called expenses and deductions, which we have in our standard agreement, we have none of ultimately. And so what happens is $100 comes in for a filmmaker. The distributor or sales agent may take a large percentage off the top because they have their distribution costs, the delivery costs, ingestion costs, some marketing costs. We're bringing all of those and we're taking those directly in our distribution fee so that there's no expenses and deductions, which makes it a much more transparent and fair deal for the filmmaker, where the first dollar in, you're actually making revenue.
Why do you think that distribution companies aren't so transparent as you guys are? Because, like a lot of times I've seen deals where they have these kind of bogus marketing expenses and all of that. What's your opinion on that? And why did you guys, I'm not saying like you guys had any sort of bogus expenses, but why not charge filmmakers a certain fee for expenses like that?
Ultimately, the reason is those distribution companies have to. They don't have the technology to scale. And in order for them to stay in business, they have to charge for those things. What we've done is we've built the technology that allows us to ultimately not have to charge those expenses and deductions. And that's what the key is ultimately. And that's how come it's not that other distributors and sales agents are negative or trying to take advantage of filmmakers in some of those expenses. Yes, there are some, but most times distributors are good people. Like it's a bad rap that some of them get, but it's actually just expenses that have to be charged because in order to distribute a title, it does have significantly high cost. It takes a lot. And, we've just made the cost so much lower that we can take it out in our distribution expense fee directly. And that's one of the keys of what we do ultimately.
Now, what does the process look like for filmmakers? Like say I'm a newbie filmmaker and I decide I'm going to go with Filmhub. I upload my film, I pass QC. What is your guys' process as far as pitching to different platforms to get our films onto these different streaming platforms?
Well, it depends ultimately kind of where you are in your life cycle, what the status of release is, how you want to release your film. We have different offerings. Ultimately, some filmmakers may want to have a scheduled release date on a certain platform. Some films require us to pitch in advance for pay one windows. So it depends on the release and how your film has to get out in the world. So each film has a little bit of a general, kind of unique journey. But in a, standard direct to streaming release, and let's say we're not, doing a window release, we're not, sending just a transactional first, we're sending to all types of services, AVOD, subscription-based service, transactional. What we do is each service has their own pitch process. And so our sales team is working directly with each of those services, in their pitch process. And some of those we are talking to on a daily basis. Some of them are weekly, some are monthly, some are quarterly. And that's where our relationship comes into working with them, that we have to ultimately meet them where they are, because we can't get the channels to move unless we have a good relationship with them and that they are licensing the content that we want to provide them. And that's ultimately one of the biggest pieces of the relationship and how we work with each different channel to get it out. And so when you hear of a filmmaker saying, oh, it's taking months to get my title out, well, ultimately, it's unfortunately probably taking months because of the buying patterns of the services. And so maybe that service actually is not buying new content this quarter. Maybe they have too much. Maybe they feel they don't want to. And so we can only get content licensed as fast as those channels can move ultimately.
One of my favorite aspects of FilmHub is just the simplicity of it. Like, I don't want to say you guys are like YouTube, but at some points it feels like I'm just able to upload my title and go. Like, put a couple metadata points in, throw in a poster, we're good to go, right? I know it's a little bit more complex than that. But one thing that scares filmmakers like me are the deliverables that a lot of traditional distributors will require, such as like E&O insurance and scary paperwork and stuff like that. And FilmHub, while they encourage that, they don't necessarily, at least, correct me here if I'm wrong, you don't necessarily require all that stuff. How do you guys get around some of those traditional distributor deliverables?
Well, so we always encourage those deliverables because ultimately what happens is you're still indemnifying Filmhub. That's the number one thing, is you are still responsible for your titles. You are taking the legal responsibility that you have created your film in the correct ethical and legal way, that you are not stealing content. And so no matter what, you are still legally bound ultimately. So that's one thing that's really important to always realize. The key is we have trust in our filmmakers ultimately, and systems that check ultimately to make sure if there are things we are concerned about, we will ask for them. And also, there are certain deals where we have to have those titles, where the streaming services or distribution channels or broadcast services do need those agreements, and we will always ask for them if they're necessary.
What do you think are kind of the bare bones that a filmmaker needs in order to pass QC or get on a lot of platforms in terms of deliverables? Like, is it mostly just like kind of the metadata that you all require? Like, is there any sort of paperwork you think kind of increases your chances on getting on a bigger platform? Like, walk me through that a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, the basics, right? You'd be surprised the number of filmmakers that submit their film without even a trailer. It is absolutely mind-numbing. And that's the first thing that I always say. Make sure your film has a trailer. Because guess what? Even if you might make it to a service, if someone has to watch the first couple minutes of your film to decide if they want to watch, it's not a way of getting them hooked on the film. A lot of people want to watch a trailer. But at the bare minimum, right, you need strong artwork. If you're going to invest anywhere and invest in strong artwork, that is the number one place that you can invest ultimately. That will make the difference a lot of the time. Trailer, strong video, obviously, you need a very strong main, and of course, all the metadata associated with it.
What do you think are some of the most common errors in the QC or quality control process that you see with films that come in?
Number one, ultimately, comes down to artwork is the first thing that we see as a massive problem. Filmmakers spend years creating a beautiful film, and then they will sometimes not pay attention nearly as much to their artwork as important. Artwork is the first thing that someone thinks of and sees when they see your film. It's actually the most important part of your film when you look at it. And so artwork is number one. Making sure a title is simply legible is something that a lot of filmmakers fail to do. Making sure that you have a good vision of someone's face on that first artwork is something filmmakers fail to do sometimes. It's one of the most important things. Other things, obviously, we have lots of issues when it comes to captions. Captions are a very hard thing to get right. But guess what? If the words don't match up with someone's, tongue as they're talking and look correct, that watcher on that screen that likes to watch with captions, which is now a significant portion of watchers, is probably going to say, I can't stand that thing's out of sync. I'm going to stop watching. And that's a missed opportunity. Filmmakers need to take a real pride in the quality of their assets. They take a pride in their work that they've told a good story, but pride in their assets is the most important thing to do. We are in this to help filmmakers make sure that they have the right level of detail. It's one of the reasons why major services like Apple, which have one of the highest levels of QC, have depended on Filmhub because of that.
In your opinion, what level of quality, speaking of quality there, what level of quality, because I know like a lot of filmmakers like myself, like I specifically talk to a lot of no budget filmmakers who may not, you know, the quality may not always be 100% there, but the effort was there to try to make that. So what do you think is kind of like the bare bones minimum as far as quality goes with what you guys accept as far as content?
Define quality of what? I'd be
Like,
curious now.
if the sound's a little off, or maybe, like one issue I have with my film in particular, which you guys did accept my film, but maybe the shots are a little dark, sometimes they're a little blurry, like, just sort of little technical things here and there. Not necessarily like, the whole sound is blown out kind of thing, but if there's like a small issue here and there, what are the chances a filmmaker are going to get their film on Filmhub still?
Well, so we have very specific technical requirements that are listed on our website. We have very specific technical requirements. And so if film passes those technical requirements, we will accept it. But at the same time, if you have bad shots that don't look good and we go and pitch that title to a buyer and the buyer says, this doesn't meet our level of quality, that film's going nowhere. So ultimately, it's a very important piece that the filmmaker says, even to meet the technical quality, do I meet the quality that the buyer is looking for? That's something that's really important. That's what you got to realize. And so, if you want your film to be on a major service like an Amazon, like a Tubi, and your film isn't at the technical level that other films are on that service, and also don't forget, each service gets more and more, appreciative of higher quality technical details, you're going to miss an opportunity. And so the technology is all there now for filmmakers to make amazing, amazing film. Use the tools, use the systems, and it can help guarantee success. Not guarantee, but it can help give you a better chance of success.
Now, you talk a lot about the artwork, but I'm curious, what is your advice to filmmakers in terms of like how they can, like, the industry is really saturated right now. Like, it's great for people like me. The barrier to entry, as they like to say, is a lot lower than it used to be. And we thank people like you who've created a platform where people like me can upload our film and, get it out to the world. What other pieces of advice do you have, for filmmakers in this crowded market to optimize their revenue, and how can they market better aside from the artwork, like you said?
Yeah. So artwork's number one. Number two comes down to ultimately starting in pre-production. Think about, if your goal is to make money, it depends on also what your goal is, right? Is your goal to make money? And this is the first question I always ask filmmakers. Is your goal to make money, or is your goal to tell a story? And you got to really think about a story that's important to you, that this has to get out in the world. You have to first think about that piece ultimately. If your goal is to make money, the number one thing you need to think about is there a large group of people that will say, I want to watch this, right? And so if you go down the rabbit hole of saying, oh, well, I hear genre films are great, I'm going to go make a horror film. Well, just making a horror film doesn't mean that a lot of people want to watch it. You got to find a horror film that a lot of people want to watch, right? You got to think through, what is something that, like, in the hundreds of thousands of horror films that are now available, what is going to make mine different and it's going to make mine interesting that people are going to want to watch? That's ultimately what you need to think about now, is really figuring out who is the target audience for this film. Sometimes also you don't always know it right away, right? Sometimes you got to kind of play around a little bit and show it to a few people and, show an idea to get a feel for that. But the key is, the number one thing I say in marketing is identify who your target audience is for that film at the beginning. Don't do it later. Or if you do it later, realize that you have a severe risk and that could lead to problems.
Can you share a standout success story of a filmmaker who achieved significant success with FilmHub?
Yeah. Let's think of my favorite actually from this past year. The program. The program is an amazing documentary on UAP. It is an unidentified aerial phenomenon. It was done by filmmaker Jim Fox. Um, and it just launched in December, hit number 6 on iTunes, and has been a massive success for them, and for us. And we've been excited to partner with him. And it's an example of, number 6 on iTunes when you're beating out massive titles from studios is pretty crazy and amazing to see.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the rights in the contract as far as FilmHub goes when filmmakers submit their content. So, a common concern that I see in my comment section a lot is that FilmHub owns a producer's content indefinitely. Can you clarify FilmHub's rights regarding a filmmaker's content and explain how you ensure filmmakers maintain control over their work?
Yeah, totally. So our contract allows you to withdraw your rights at any given time, right? So we want to make sure that the rights that we take allow us to continue to license that film. But at any given time, a filmmaker can revoke those rights. We allow you to take a film down at any given time. So they are in perpetuity until you remove it.
I don't understand why anybody would want to take down their film, but can you tell me, say somebody's just completely unhappy with FilmHub, how does that process work as far as taking your film down?
Yeah, pretty simple. It's as simple as an email to our team. If it's within 3 years, we do have a $99 takedown fee just because maybe your film hasn't had a chance at actually finding its audience yet. But after 3 years, no fee whatsoever to take your film down. And we email the services that it is potentially on, and we take it down from there.
And say it's on a streaming platform, how long does that usually take for it to be kind of pulled down from that service?
Depends on the service, because ultimately it depends on the license term that we have sold them, right? So some license terms might be renewing every day. Some license terms may renew yearly. So it depends at whatever the end of the license term is that we have licensed to them is when that film can come down.
And if they do want to take their film down and it's, the license term is a little bit beyond when they ask to take it down, how does the payment still work from there? Does filmmakers still get paid from FilmHub until the content is taken down, or how does that
Until the
process
content's
work?
taken down. Yeah. Even if a service, maybe a lot of times services forget to take down or, are too slow in taking it down, those payments still flow through to the filmmaker.
There's a lot of rumors that you guys aren't working with Tubi anymore. Is that BS or not?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to reframe this because I literally got a comment about it today.
That's hilarious. That's really funny.
One of my favorite things that I've heard you say in other interviews is that filmmakers need to diversify. They shouldn't just be I want my film on Tubi. You should absolutely want your film on Tubi, but you should be getting on Amazon and Plex and all these different platforms because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So can you comment on, just filmmakers who were they're just stuck on I really want to get on Tubi, so I have to get on Tubi, and they may not be looking at some of these other great platforms that you offer.
Yeah. So ultimately the key is, and this actually stems from my, co-founder Klaus, he's a composer, right? His royalty sheets are many pages long. Ones and zeros and pennies in royalty land make a big difference when you add them up. And sure, services like Tubi and Amazon are a lion's share of the portion of the revenue. But ultimately, if you're not adding up the pennies on the rest of your content, you've missed out a massive opportunity. And so what I generally tell filmmakers actually, and this is true data ultimately, yes, the top X% are probably 50, 60% of your revenue, but the rest of the services are another probably 40 to 50% at least. And that's based on real dollar signs and revenue. And so if you're not on as many services as you can, you're probably missing out on half the value of your film. That's huge. That is huge. So, and also, don't forget, different films hit on different services. I just had an example yesterday of a film that literally had done thousands of dollars on Tubi, launched on YouTube's new free with ad service, $50,000 in a quarter, insanely different numbers. And that was a film that thought we thought couldn't find its audience. It just needed to be on the right service at the right time. It's crazy.
One question that's brought up to me pretty frequently now, like we can't have a discussion about filmmaking and film distribution without talking about AI. What are your thoughts on AI generated content? Is Filmhub accepting AI generated content? I guess just what are your thoughts on that as a whole?
As with any technology innovation, it creates the ability to access and do things in a different way that no one ever thought possible, right? All of a sudden, Alex is going to be able to have amazing sea monsters in his movie if he wants to. That's cool. That's amazing, right? You have now the tools that only a major studio used to have. That means Alex is now a major studio. That's awesome. And that's what people need to realize the power of AI is ultimately going to help with. It's a tool. It's a tool that helps you as a creative be better. That's all that this needs to be. It's the same thing that, your editing suite now is 10x better than what you had 5 years ago. It's the same thing that Red cameras made cameras affordable for filmmakers around the world to build amazing content. That's it. It's another innovation that's going to help filmmakers and allow them to become bigger and better.
What new features or tools are you most excited about Filmhub's future?
Oh, very excited. We recently launched some new analytics dashboards, which is very exciting. So we are now launching channel-specific analytics dashboards. So you now can see your Amazon data directly in your Filmhub dashboard, which is very exciting. We're going to continue providing new channels in there. And we are also likely going to be doing a lot of features ultimately and making it easier for you to get further insights into how we are pitching your service, how we're pitching your film. And so those are some things that are going to be coming in the future as well.
And you also have a new filmmaker referral program. You want to tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we are now the first distributor, I believe. If someone can tell me one, please tell me in the comments, that allows filmmakers to refer other filmmakers and take percentage participation points in the films that they refer. We have been incredibly blessed to work with an amazing group of filmmakers, and we want to make sure ultimately that they keep growing the community and take part in that ultimately. And that's why we're cutting filmmakers in on a portion of our revenue. It's not taking away from the other filmmaker. It's not taking away from the filmmakers' portion of revenue. It's cutting you in on the revenue from Filmhub.
What do you think are the biggest misconceptions about Filmhub that you would like to clear up with everybody?
Oh, I think the biggest one ultimately is people think that Filmhub sometimes is just a place where you upload your film and it sits on there and distribution channels come and select it. No, we have an entire sales team ultimately that's pitching and getting films on streaming services. If we were just a listing service for films, films would not monetize. Buyers need to be talked to. They need to be sold. That is ultimately the number one thing that our team is focused on.
Alan, thank you so much for coming on today. This was absolutely awesome. Where can people learn more about you? Where can they learn more about Filmhub?
Come to filmhub.com, reach out to our contact acquisitions form, and our team will be in touch.
I want to give another huge shout out to Alan for coming on the channel. Obviously, it's really awesome that he sees the value in smaller filmmakers like us. So if you want to learn more about Filmhub, I'll obviously have them linked in the description. If you want to help support me, my feature film Cashing Out, which is also distributed by Filmhub, will be linked in the description as well. You can also like, subscribe, and all that stuff to this channel if you want to see more interviews like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.